everybody. Welcome to the floor of the CWCB Expo in the Javits Center in New York City.
This is really about the city. This is really about society. This is really about all the things that cannabis means to all of us.
One of the things we really have to do with the people that are in the industry is advocate more for the industry with non-industry people.
We know education cuts across every part of society, whether it's talking to your kids, whether it's talking to people in high school, training college students, talking to people about hemp. That is part of your obligation, really.
There's a lot of education that goes into helping people understand what cannabis is. It's no longer, the devil's lettuce or anything like that, but it's a big real business. It's a big real industry.
That tells you that they know that this market, even though in its infancy, the legalized infancy, that there's a lot of opportunity because they need a bigger booth to accommodate the attendees. And you could hear the background. There's a lot of people here yesterday and today.
Can you explain what maize, M-A-I-Z-E, is?
Corn.
Oh, I love corn. Corn. We'll see you next Friday live on Green Rush. All right, welcome back to the final hour of Green Rush Live here on a Friday afternoon on Pro Cannabis Media. We're here every Friday from 4 p.m. to 6 p.m. Eastern Time, which thankfully I figured out Pacific Time is 3 hours earlier so that I can actually reach out to some people we know on the West Coast, like Josh Kincaid out in Washington State. And now we're bringing in somebody else from Washington State. His name is Bruce Barcott, and he is I guess I have to call you a former editor of Leafly.com. Is that where we're at right now, Bruce?
That's where we're at, Jimmy. Yeah, absolutely. I am footloose and fancy free now after 7 good years at Leafly.
Yeah, and you did a great job. I mean, I'm a big fan. I've read the book, Weed the People, and I actually have it as required reading for people who want to learn about the space that we're in now. Bruce, as you look back at those 7 years and you look back at Washington State, there's a lot of doom and gloom and reality going on right now in the cannabis space. We just spent a lot of time with Michael Correa from Washington, D.C., and talking a lot about the challenges of getting any kind of federal reform. Are you amazed that we're still growing at this point? I mean, you'd think the Green Rush happened early. There was Cannabis 1.0 and then there was 2.0. And are we at like 3.0 yet? Or are we still kind of trying to get through the 2.0?
I think, honestly, we're still trying to get through the 2.0. I think of 1.0 as being, really what do we want to say, 2014 through 2021, maybe, with a little ancillary boost from the pandemic. But I do think we're in a settling period, a falling out period right now, where a lot of the hope and over exuberance that went into the cannabis legalization movement and then the industry, and rightly so for so many reasons, has settled down. And I think that a lot of people for many, many years, viewed cannabis as the next tech in terms of the financial possibilities there, in terms of people coming in and, making $1 billion with a B. And, we can go in many directions talking about that, but I think the reality is that, and people are seeing this now, is that it is a hard business to turn a buck in. There's parts of this that are agriculture. There's parts of this that are just plain retail. And it doesn't, scale in the way that Facebook might scale. You still have to sell a person a joint or a gram or an ounce face to face,
Right. Oh, no, absolutely. And we were talking about earlier is I think the government, both at the federal, state, and town level, have done an amazing job of putting so many elements and levels in to really test the passion and commitment of the industry and try to do everything they possibly can to either break the industry or really thin the herd before it even becomes a herd.
Yeah, and one of the things that we've seen play out is, there's this great tension between the MSOs, the large players who have stores and operations in many states across the U.S., versus the local players, the local people who are trying to get up a small farm, who are trying to get up a single retail store, and there's a way in which many governments are trying to build in opportunities for small operators, for entrepreneurs, especially people of color who have been harmed by the war on drugs, this sort of thing. But there's a way in which also those efforts are being undermined by the overzealousness of a lot of the rules that are going in on the state level and a local level. Essentially, we see this most commonly with the so-called opt-out towns that don't allow any businesses in their district, but also the onorousness of a lot of state regulations, and then the simple fact of taxes, of that IRS rule that just slays any notion of profit every year. It's a tough one.
So Bruce, with that, you're talking about 280E, I'm assuming, not being able to write off stuff. Yesterday, I think it was yesterday, like last night, I saw something about the Banking Act, or safe banking in DC getting, I forget what the term is, it got pushed up or whatever, and it's the first time in a while that anything has been given that kind of priority, which indicates, I guess, a significant drive or interest in order to get something done, not just placating the audience, but like truly trying to get something done. So between banking, and this is a three-part choose your own solution here.
All right.
It's going to be the biggest drive for the industry? Is it going to be 280E that you just mentioned with taxes? Is it going to be banking, or is it going to be interstate commerce?
Oh, I know the answer.
Oh, you know the answer, huh, Jimmy?
Yeah.
I think if you asked me to pick one, let's say, right? I have a choice of three, and I can pick one. Honestly, I would pick interstate commerce.
Yep.
I really would.
We are the United States of America, after all, right? Yeah.
Yeah. This artificial bordering of states that we do, and forcing people to grow cannabis in New Jersey, while at the same time, Oregon is just like drowning in cannabis plants, and California to a certain extent as well. I think that really could even things out quite a bit, and help right the ship in terms of making the national cannabis industry a more logical industry, where people who have the resources to grow and the sunshine and the soil can grow and just go bananas, and then put it on a truck and ship it across the country.
Right.
I think it's held back the industry a lot in terms of how COVID sped up the global landscape about 10 years for a lot of things, specifically in our industry, delivery, e-commerce, things of that nature. Like it sped up a lot. And hopefully that'll kind of continue in that direction. Is there anything that you see that could propel that any quicker?
I'm not sure, because I think that for the last 2 years, until the House turned over to Republicans, there was this great hope that at least safe banking would pass, if not full federal legalization. And then, when nothing happened and the House went over to the Republicans, and I really don't expect anything to come out of the House in a positive way in terms of drug reform or cannabis legal reform. I think there's a sort of a feeling of retrenchment, and a feeling that, okay, this is kind of what we're set with, I think, for the next couple of years, and we're going to have to work within these guidelines. And unfortunately, that has led to other sort of ancillary repercussions. That realization, I think, scared a lot of investment money away, which has made it much harder for a number of companies to, either stay afloat and make payroll, or just to get started. There's not that kind of crazy money available that we saw 4, 5, 6 years ago.
And I think it's interesting because the whole movement was designed to legalize and get rid of the illicit market, okay, or at least minimize it. And it has had the exact opposite effect because of the bureaucracy, because of these issues. And it's also another reason why I think you're starting to see states making deals with each other out there on the West Coast for interstate commerce. It's like, why do we need to wait around if you're out in Oregon, Washington, and California? Let's just share what we have out here on the West Coast. And again, it makes sense in business, but is it hurting the legalization movement? Is it hurting the reform movement? I guess is the question I have for you, Bruce.
I don't think the idea of interstate commerce and the fact that these states are moving ahead in theory, if not in practice.
Right.
I think it's having the exact opposite effect. I think that, again, for many years, there was the assumption that, the states are the nursery, the cradle of new projects in democracy. And we're trying out legalization, and eventually that'll burble up to the federal level, and Congress will naturally pass Legalization Act, and things will be better. It hasn't happened. I think interstate commerce could be the next step that states have to take on their own, sort of pushing past the existing line to make progress happen. And I'm not sure how that will happen. It could be, back in 2013, after Colorado and Washington legalized, there were a lot of delicate negotiations or delicate talks that went on between Washington, Colorado, their state, essentially governors, and the Obama administration. How are we going to handle this? Because it's still definitely federally illegal. And so the Justice Department essentially came out with a memo that said, all right, we're going to let you proceed with this, but here's the line. You can proceed, but don't go past these lines. I think something similar might, help propel a little more progress in terms of interstate commerce, in terms of let's say Washington, Oregon, and California got together and presented something to the Department of Justice and said, hey, look, we have a real problem with the illicit market. This is one way we think that could really give us a strong tool to combat that illicit market. Let's just lower the barriers between those state lines, the Columbia River, and then, that line in California that I don't know is geographically marked, but it's there. I don't know. That's what I think about interstate commerce. I'm very excited about the possibilities there.
Yeah, just like COVID slowed everything or sped some stuff up, I think that also interstate commerce could do the same thing. If we look at if the dormant commerce clause was used to allow for interstate commerce, we could have the equivalent of incubators and think tanks and focus groups and all of these people coming together to brainstorm on, because you've got some people in states that are saying we've got fire, and then you look at it and man, that's a meme right there. That's poop soup in a jar. What are you doing? If we could get rid of the barriers and these ridiculous state borders and actually allow for a single cannabis cup where all of these innovators could come through, we could have some really, really good cannabis and maybe allow for Blue Dream to come back because it's not a high yield, or it goes into the rainy months or whatever. And so they base these cultivars or strains on what's going to be a higher yield. And I don't want to pick my choice based on the farmer making the most money. I want to pick it based on what terpene profile works best for me. And I think that having an open interstate commerce will allow people to come together, figure out what's the best way to do it, where and how, and then network like a true co-op to be able to produce the best. There's a guy running around with a sweatshirt said the weed's supposed to taste good. Like that. It's a meme. It's almost funny that he has to wear that on a shirt, but it's standard. It should be good. And I believe that interstate commerce could be that thing to really kind of bring everybody together to have that connoisseur cannabis that we all deserve.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that was a perennial challenge when I was editing it at Leafly was the fact that we wanted to get information about the best products to our readers. That was like goal number one. People need more information about what they're buying or what they could buy, what's good and what's not good. One of the huge challenges and frustrations was that because the industry is so fragmented state to state, you could write about what's amazing in California right now. And people just across the border, I mean, in Oregon, I mean, obviously, if you're just across the border, you can drive. But, people on the West Coast will be like, wow, that sounds amazing. How can I get it? Well, you can't. You got to go to California to get it. Or, likewise in Massachusetts, if they got some new product in Massachusetts and we're raving about it, you can only still obtain it in Massachusetts, even though there are, obviously companies and brands that move state to state now, not all of them do. But
like the hash strips in Canada, we can rip a piece of hash and put it in your joint, but you can't get it here like that.
Right. Well, whatever it is, like it is a real problem, and it's something that I can't think of another industry that faces that.
That's right. That's right. No, it's so unique, guys. We all know that. But one of the things we talk about interstate commerce, and this is one of the things that is a bit hypocritical because there is already interstate commerce in the cannabis industry. People are using they're manufacturing, the genetics are coming across state lines, whether they be seeds, they're turning it into concentrates, they're turning it into edibles. It's the same recipe in California as it is in Massachusetts, as it is in Michigan. This is happening. They're replicating the same product in other states. But what's hurting is the fact that flower can't be across state lines, right? So once again, the enlightenment of our government needs to happen because they have to understand that there's already interstate commerce going on. And by the way, you feds aren't getting a piece of this yet.
Yeah, that's the FOMO we should be setting, is like, you're missing out on some money. If you can ship seeds, how come I can't ship a clone or a seedling or a plant? It makes no sense.
No
and then
sense.
Go all the way to the end with the finished product. Like, what's the difference?
That's exactly right. Hey, Bruce, I'm going to tell you something. There was an article, you pointed out a great article, and I want to get to that in a minute. But in Massachusetts, the Talking Joints memo produced by Chris Ferrone put out a interesting memo, or I guess it was an article this week, on the testing, the inconsistencies of testing, and some of the, let's just say, less than legal activities that go on between the testing labs and the producers of the product to enhance those testing results. You guys at Leafly, I'll never forget, you went and you tested different products and you kind of reported on it. It was a great expose. Once again, it's part of the learning process about how delicate the plant's makeup is. You can't, you use the word clone, Josh. You can't clone cannabis. You just can't. It impacts everybody differently. And every time that a batch is tested out of this area, let's just say, it's not going to be the same as being tested out of this area. And by the way, our regulators and our legislatures all want it to be clean and make sure we don't have mold. And I as a consumer, I don't want to have mold in it either, by the way. Not that I even knew what mold was back in the 70s or the 80s, but I didn't care back then. I was just happy to get it then. Now you can clean it up.
You didn't like the mold on those stems you were smoking, huh, Jimmy?
That's right. That's right. No, we used to. I take the
with the fire. You've got 100% mold now, whether it's indoor or outdoor. Those mold spores are going through every single filter in everywhere. So everyone in the Northeast has got mold now, and we figured that out, Bruce. You remember 2017 when the Eastern Oregon fires were blowing through, and then people were getting popped, and they're like, "What's going on?" And I think you guys probably wrote on that, and were like, it's the fires pushing the mold spores through, creating havoc for everybody. And then they just go mold to gold. We're going to blast this. And then now you can dab it safely.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, lab shopping has been a problem. You know, that's a problem that cropped up early here in Washington State, with folks going lab to lab and see who can, you know, result the highest THC level, because that's the biggest bang for the buck the consumer wanted. And you know, there's the classic two-prong attack on that. One is simply to continue to educate consumers that it's not all about the THC. It's about so many other things that go into the experience. But I think there's also a way in which I think when we all started up these regulations and these industrial systems, we thought that we think of labs as being sort of angelic players in the system, you know, where of course they wouldn't pipe their results, you know, they're decent folk, they're scientists.
Robots.
And you know, we learned early on that no, actually, like there's a profit motive involved here, and that can really skew things. And you know, I've seen some reports in the last year where folks are advertising, like, you know, THC percentages in the 40s and such, and I'm like, I'm not sure what you're doing to a plant to pump it up to THC in the 40s or 50s, but like that's no longer a plant. There's no room for cellulose anymore. Like what is going on there? That's not working.
Right. So
yeah, it is an issue. And I think that, again, it's so early in terms of consumer knowledge about these products.
That's right.
And has been, you know, this, you know, we've had a forced ignorance about it for 85 years of prohibition, you know?
Right. And let's educate some of our consumers. You can go into a dispensary, you can look and see what has the highest percentage of THC, and you can make your buy, because that's what's been going on now. But we all know, those that have, you know, been around it and talked to scientists and growers and everything, it is the terpene profile that dictates the impact of that THC and the other cannabinoids in the plant. And that is probably more important than the percentage of THC. But, you know, people are looking, I want to get the best stuff to get the best high. Well, you know, maybe that's not what you should be looking for. You want to get the best result of what you're looking for this plant to do for you.
And you wouldn't want to get on a motorcycle going 1,000 miles an hour without a steering wheel, and terpenes are the steering wheel. So you're going to get somewhere fast, but how do you know where you're going to go?
Yeah.
Bruce, why is it in Washington State, when I go to my local dispensary, or no matter where it is, how come they don't have terpenes yet? You go to Nevada, a relatively recent state, and they buy a lot of stuff based on terpenes. And yet in Washington, they give me happy, you know, relaxed, or THC based on the lowest price. So I could filter on price and filter on THC. Why, after so long, is a state like Washington falling behind?
Huh.
I think that's one where, you know, that's got to be essentially consumer driven. I really do think that has got to come from consumers demanding to know about terpenes, about the terpene profile of the product they're buying. I don't want to sit here with a hammer and bang on our local alcohol control board in Washington State, but our regulators do their best, but they have never really been set up to regulate cannabis proactively. I mean, they were from the start an alcohol regulatory body. That's what they do well, and they really, I think with cannabis, they're all about, you know, enforcing age minimums, which they should. They're all about, you know, enforcing some other things, but really they don't get involved in demanding that testing labs, you know, give a terpene profile with every run they do. And so I think that unless that comes from the consumer telling the bud tender, telling the retailer, hey, I want to know more about what you got going on here, it's not going to happen. I mean, look, we've been trying to get homegrown rules relaxed here in Washington for years. Like we have pretty, we got higher priorities at a certain point when it comes to regulations and the state legislature. So yeah, I don't know. I think again, it's a consumer demand kind of thing. And we, at Leafly, we tried many different ways of talking about terpenes. But I think the industry still has a long way to go in terms of coming up with the language to talk about terpenes and the experience and connecting those things.
Right.
Because it just, we don't have the words yet,
Right. Hey,
I think John Kingsbury is going to finally overturn that felony on home grow this year in Washington. So I think that bill is going to be received fairly well if they don't approve it this year, hopefully next year.
Good. Yeah. Yeah.
Hey.
I mean, look, just to cap that thought. I mean, I like beer. I'm not a beer connoisseur, but there's right now there's a craze, at least in my corner of the country, for hazy IPAs, right? Juicy hazy IPAs. And those are very blunt terms, but they're the words that I use when I go and look for that specific product right now. It would probably embarrass somebody who's actually knows something about beer, but I'm a very mainstream connoisseur, and I think we need simpler terms and more powerful terms to describe terpenes.
Oh, well, by the way, malemoline, just pronouncing them is a challenge, let alone spelling them. You guys are both from Washington State, and we haven't even talked about, wasn't there a news item this week about one of the Tri-Cities opting in to cannabis now? Is it Pasco, Washington? Is that a city in Washington? Okay, so that's in our news show. It's on at 6 o'clock. I just want you to know I spotted it. They are now, so a lot of states, when they go legal, allow the local towns to opt in or opt out of whether they want to have dispensaries in their town. It isn't tied to the actual vote for that particular ballot question or anything like that. And in Washington State, that city, Pasco, has decided to opt in to the cannabis dispensaries. And that was a pretty big deal. I thought that, because if you look at New York, a lot of the towns, once they go legal, they go, no, not in our town. It's the NIMBY factor, right, guys? Isn't that what they call it? The NIMBY factor?
Yeah. Not in my backyard.
Yeah. And right, not in my backyard. And yet here in Washington State, when I'm looking at that and I say, oh, maybe this is a trend, maybe the new market in New Jersey, those that have opted out will now start to opt in. More and more towns in Massachusetts now are looking at the taxes that are generated in the various towns that are
that's the thing you got to focus on, because you're making it sound like they pulled their head out of their ass in Pasco, and they didn't. What happened was, I believe, is that they were incentivized because A, they weren't going to get the money, and B, I think they're literally paying up to $2.5 million, don't quote me on that, to opt in. So Bruce can maybe give us more info.
I am out of the loop on the Pasco.
Not covering the beat anymore. It's not his beat anymore. I did it. I found it. Hey, this is big. Give me credit for that. Props.
Pasco's
We Talk News had this story.
But here's the thing: Pasco's a teeny town, but it is conservative country, because it's all about farming and everything. So that's a big deal, because there's a thing called Red Mountain in Eastern Washington, and it has a wine mafia. I use the term loosely, and they don't want cannabis anywhere. And so they use that NIMBY, the not my backyard thing, to push people out and say cows, or cannabis stinks. Not the cow shit that's everywhere, right, but the cannabis. And so it's hilarious. It's hilarious. They're using anything they can out in Pasco, but the fact that this conservative area of Pasco is saying yes is huge news at a very, very teeny local level, because it's just saying, hey, it's acceptable, it's money, let's do it, who cares, nobody's pushing back. So all of those things at the heart of the country in middle America is going to start expanding, and there's going to be a lot of people going, damn, I didn't think that Utah would have it, or we're in Washington State, and Ferndale up north, and a couple other places don't serve alcohol on Sundays, but they'll have cannabis. So there's some of these areas that are opting in, that don't like alcohol, that are saying yes to cannabis, and that's the takeaway, is that nobody's pushing back because no one cares.
Right. We had a viewer from Utah in the chat room earlier today too. So it just gives you an idea. We've got that kind of reach. Hey, Bruce, I love talking to you. I really do. I don't care if you're not on the beat anymore. You have such a great perspective on this industry and the history of it. And I so appreciate you coming on today. And I really hope we get a chance to continue this because I've always enjoyed your work.
Absolutely. I love talking with you, Jimmy. And I love talking cannabis. Like, honestly, 10 years ago, I got in on this sort of fell into it when, Washington legalized, and I happened to live in Washington, and I looked around and said, what the hell's going on here? And, the more I did my research and wrote my book, the more I just love covering this subject and thinking about it and writing about it. There's so many different just aspects of life that get teased out of this. We were talking the other day, you and me, just everything from how cannabis affects sleep to the idea of stigma, and the social racial history of the United States gets so entwined with all of this. I really love it. I can't get enough of it.
There you go. Well, let's stay tuned to Pro Cannabis Media, because hopefully 2023 is the year that the rest of the country picks up on what we're doing here, and share, like, and subscribe to everybody. That's what we want. Bruce Barcott, thank you again. We will keep in touch, and I'm looking forward to the next book that comes out.
Awesome. Great talking with you both.
You bet. Last half hour of Green Rush Live coming up next. Don't go away. It's a whole new world of weed out there, isn't it? Everyone is learning new ways to titrate, ingest, consume, imbibe, and engage with this plant medicine we call cannabis. Hi, I'm Jimmy Young, the founder of Pro Cannabis Media and the host of In the Weeds, and once in a while, the really live business cannabis talk show we call Green Rush on Friday afternoons from 4 p.m. to 6 p.m. Eastern. I've been a medical patient in Massachusetts for almost 10 years now. I remember my first trip to a dispensary just outside of Boston, and I told the bud tender I didn't want to smoke it anymore. So I tried edibles, then tinctures, then vaping, and now if I'm going to smoke, I only use the Weedgets filtration system. What? The Weedgets.com, Weedgets, that's weed, W-E-E-D, G-E-T-S.com, is where you'll find the planet's coolest product.
Both cool the smoke from 1300 degrees to just 90 into your lungs. Plus, the maze pipe and pre-roll filters get rid of all the gunk that you just don't want in your lungs if you can help it.
Add in the code of PCM TV and you get 15% off. So just go to Weedgets.com and check out the best way to enjoy a cooler smoke with less coughing and hacking and more peace of mind. All that resin and tar is collected in the polyurethane filters that are easy to clean with soap, water, and a few Q-tips. Your lungs will thank you, and so will I.
We are a cultivation through to consumption lifestyle brand for the cannabis industry. Of course, the crown jewel in our product line is the Armoire home grow system. So now with Green Goddess Supply, we can take you everywhere from growing it in the Armoire right through to storing it, consuming it, rolling it, storing it, you name it, A to Z. Our goal is to enable everybody and anybody anywhere to be able to produce their own organic flower quickly, easily, discreetly, and inexpensively.
You would think that it is. However, there's quite a bit of debate right now in the accounting industry when it relates to cannabis with this exact question. I'm part of a few different networking groups that are solely accountants for cannabis companies. And there's been quite a bit of back and forth in those communities and discussion regarding whether 280E, if it went away, if the administration legalized cannabis or took it off of Schedule 1, what would happen? And it could go either way right now. The debate is it can make the accountant's life much easier. That's what a lot of the inexperienced accountants are saying right now, it seems. Whereas the accountants that have been in this industry for a while and have gone through the same thing that happened with hemp a few years ago are saying that it actually will make lives more difficult, because when hemp became declassified a while back, the accounting became more complicated.
Safetiva Labs in Westfield is fast becoming the #1 testing lab for cannabis in Western Massachusetts. Safetiva understands the importance for accurate on-time test results for your product. That's why their current compliance panel turnaround time is less than 2 days. That's Safetiva Labs in Westfield. For more information, go to safetiva.com. The Vermont Cannabis Report is supported by another Green Mountain business, Cannatrol, winner of High Times Best Dry Cure System. Check them out at cannatrolls.com. The Vermont Cannabis Report is supported by another Green Mountain business, Cannatrol, winner of High Times Best Dry Cure System. Check them out at cannatrolls.com. Brandon Jones, Missouri Cannabis Report is brought to you by Baker Brands, a curated B2B marketplace for head shops and dispensaries.